The rain was falling on her mother's fresh grave when her husband said the words that would destroy him. "You're uneducated, Eleanor, just like she was. She was nothing, and so are you." His mistress laughed, his mother smiled, and Eleanor, kneeling in the mud at her own mother's funeral, said nothing, but her phone was recording. What none of them knew was this: the woman they were mocking as worthless had just inherited documents proving she owned 12% of the company where her husband worked. Documents her grandmother had hidden 60 years ago. Documents that would expose a fraud worth $47 million. Within 6 weeks, Eleanor would lose everything: her home, her money, her freedom. She would be arrested on false charges, betrayed by her own lawyer, and framed as a criminal by the man who had promised to love her. And then she would rise. This is the story of how a woman they called uneducated became the most powerful person in the room, how she turned their cruelty into evidence, how she transformed 60 years of silence into justice. But first, she had to survive the trap they were building around her. Lesson and value. Dear viewers, this story carries a powerful message. When people underestimate you, when they dismiss you, when they try to make you feel small, remember this truth: silence is not weakness. Sometimes silence is observation. Sometimes silence is preparation. And sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one keeping the best records. This story will teach you how to protect yourself when the people closest to you become your enemies, how to document abuse, how to build evidence, how to survive betrayal and come back stronger than before. Every woman who has ever been told she was too emotional, too sensitive, or too uneducated needs to hear what happens next. Rain fell softly on the cemetery grounds, turning the freshly turned earth into dark mud. Eleanor Mason. Cole knelt alone at her mother's grave, her black dress soaking through at the knees. She did not care. The cold seeping into her bones felt appropriate somehow, matching the emptiness that had hollowed her out over the past 3 days. Grace Mason had been buried for exactly 47 minutes. The other mourners, all 12 of them, had already retreated to their cars, driven away by the weather and the awkwardness of not knowing what to say. Eleanor had stayed. She needed this moment alone with her mother, needed to whisper the goodbye she had been too shocked to speak at the hospital. Behind her, a car door slammed. Eleanor did not turn around. She recognized the heavy footsteps, the impatient rhythm of expensive shoes on wet grass. Marcus, her husband of 7 years. The man who had checked his watch 11 times during the funeral service. "We need to go," Marcus Cole said, his voice carrying that particular edge of irritation she had grown so familiar with. "The Hendersons' party starts in an hour." Eleanor's fingers tightened around the white roses she had brought. "It's my mother's funeral, Marcus, and she's buried now." He stopped a few feet behind her, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixing with the rain. "What else is there to do? Stand in the mud crying? That won't bring her back." A woman's laugh cut through the air, light, musical, cruel. Eleanor turned her head slightly. Veronica Shaw stood beside Marcus, sharing his umbrella, her arm looped through his with an intimacy that made Eleanor's stomach clench. Behind them both, Patricia Cole examined her manicured nails with practiced disinterest. Her husband, his mistress, his mother, all 3 of them standing over her mother's fresh grave like they were waiting for a table at a restaurant. "You know what your problem is, Ellie?" Marcus continued, using the nickname she had once loved and now flinched at. "You're uneducated, just like she was." He gestured dismissively at the headstone. "Neither of you ever understood how the real world works. You sit around feeling things, crying about things, never actually doing anything that matters." Veronica's smile widened. She was 32, polished, sharp, everything Eleanor had once believed she could never compete with. This is where women like her end up, isn't it? Veronica said sweetly, her eyes moving from the grave to Eleanor and back again, raising daughters just as limited as themselves. It's almost genetic. Eleanor felt the words land like physical blows. Her hands trembled. Her throat closed around all the responses she wanted to scream. Patricia Cole finally looked up from her nails. "Let's go," she said coldly, addressing her son but looking at Eleanor. "There's nothing here worth staying for." They turned and walked away. Marcus did not look back. Veronica did, just once, a triumphant little glance over her shoulder that said everything about who had won and who had lost. Eleanor remained kneeling in the mud. The rain fell harder now, plastering her hair to her face, running down her cheeks and mixing with tears she could no longer distinguish. She stared at her mother's headstone until the letters blurred. Grace Elizabeth Mason, beloved mother, forever remembered. Forever remembered by whom? By a daughter who had let herself be reduced to nothing, by a husband who could not spare 1 hour of respect, by a world that had apparently decided Grace Mason's entire existence was worth dismissing as uneducated. Eleanor reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. The screen was wet, but still functional. She stopped the recording she had started 3 minutes ago when she first heard the car door slam. She had not planned to record anything. It had been instinct, the same instinct that had made her start documenting things 3 months ago when she first noticed money disappearing from their joint account. The instinct her mother had planted in her years before. "Write everything down," Grace used to say. "People lie. Paper doesn't." Eleanor saved the recording to her cloud backup. Then she reached for the chain around her neck, pulling out the small brass key her mother had pressed into her hand during those final moments at the hospital. "Box 247, Grace had whispered, her voice barely audible over the beeping machines. "First National Bank. Everything I couldn't tell you is there. Promise me you'll go alone." Eleanor had promised. She had not understood what she was promising to find. She looked at the key now, turning it over in her palm. Such a small thing, such an ordinary thing, but her mother had guarded it like a treasure, had made her swear to go alone, had waited until her last breath to reveal its existence. Why? What secrets had Grace Mason carried to her grave? Eleanor stood slowly, her joints aching from kneeling in the cold. She looked down at her mother's headstone one final time. "You're right about one thing, Marcus," she whispered. "I am my mother's daughter." She tucked the key back under her dress, feeling its cool weight against her chest. "And you have no idea what that means." Gentier. 3 weeks earlier, Eleanor's life had looked completely different on the surface. She woke each morning at 5:30 to prepare Marcus's breakfast. She ironed his shirts, organized his files, maintained his calendar. She had given up her teaching position 2 years into their marriage because Marcus said it embarrassed him to have a wife who worked with children for poverty wages. She had believed once that these sacrifices were the price of love, that supporting her husband's ambitions was the same as having her own, that his success would become their success, shared equally. She had been wrong. The morning her mother was first hospitalized, Eleanor had been making eggs. "Did you iron my blue shirt?" Marcus had asked, not looking up from his phone. "It's in your closet." "I also. And the Henderson file? Did you organize it like I asked?" "Yes, but Marcus, the hospital called about my mother. They said her condition has..." "Handle it." He finally looked up, his expression the patient irritation of a man explaining something obvious to a child. "That's what you do, right? Handle the small things so I can focus on what matters?" He left without eating. without asking about her mother, without noticing that Eleanor's hands were shaking. That afternoon, at the grocery store, her card was declined. Eleanor stood frozen at the register, a line forming behind her, watching the screen flash insufficient funds over and over. She checked her phone. The joint account that should have held several $1,000s showed a balance of $47.32. She put items back: bread, milk, the flowers she had planned to bring her mother in the hospital. A woman behind her sighed loudly. The cashier looked embarrassed. Eleanor paid what she could in cash and walked to her car with burning cheeks and a mind full of questions. Where had the money gone? How could Marcus have spent so much without telling her? Was there another account she did not know about? She thought about asking him. She thought about it all the way to the hospital, where her mother lay pale and thin against white sheets. She thought about it while Grace squeezed her hand and asked, "Are you happy, Eleanor? Really happy?" Eleanor had smiled and said yes. Of course, everything was fine. Her mother had looked at her with those knowing eyes, the same eyes Eleanor saw in the mirror every morning, and said nothing. But her hand tightened around Eleanor's fingers, and her expression shifted into something that looked almost like grief. "If anything happens to me," Grace said suddenly, "remember what I taught you. Mom, don't talk like, remember. Write everything down. Keep your own records. Never let someone else control all the keys to your life." Eleanor had nodded without understanding. She had assumed her mother was confused, perhaps feverish. The doctors had warned that the illness was progressing quickly. She had not known then what she would learn 3 weeks later at her mother's grave. She had not known that those words were not confusion, but warning, not fever but truth, not rambling, but the most important advice Grace Mason had ever given her daughter. And she certainly had not known that within 2 months, those words would save her life. The First National Bank sat on a quiet corner of Main Street, its brick facade unchanged since 1942. Eleanor had driven past it thousands of times, without ever going inside. Her mother had kept an account here for years, but Eleanor had never asked why, had never wondered why Grace preferred this small, old-fashioned bank to the modern chains Marcus insisted on using. Now standing in the marble lobby, with the brass key clutched in her sweating palm, Eleanor understood that nothing about her mother's choices had ever been random. "Can I help you?" The woman behind the counter was middle-aged, professional, wearing a name tag that read Susan. "I need to access a safe deposit box. Number 247. Susan's eyebrows rose slightly. "That box has been held for quite some time. May I see your identification and the key?" Eleanor handed over both. Susan examined them carefully, typed something into her computer, then looked up with an expression Eleanor could not quite read. "Follow me, please." They descended a narrow staircase to the basement level. The vault room was cool and silent, lined floor to ceiling with metal boxes of various sizes. Susan led Eleanor to a corner where the oldest boxes were kept, their brass fixtures dulled by time. "Box 247, Susan said, sliding a master key into one lock while Eleanor inserted her key into the other. "This box was opened in 1963. The rental has been paid in full through 2040. Your mother was very thorough." Paid through 2040. Her mother, who had lived frugally, who had worn the same winter coat for 15 years, who had refused to let Eleanor buy her a new television. Her mother had paid 60 years of rental fees in advance for a safe deposit box Eleanor never knew existed. Why? Susan stepped back. "Take as long as you need. Press the button by the door when you're finished." The vault door closed with a heavy click. Eleanor was alone. She pulled the box from its slot and carried it to the small table in the center of the room. Her hands were shaking again, the way they had been shaking for weeks now. She lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of documents. Yellowed paper, faded ink, official stamps, and signatures from another era. On top of everything sat a handwritten letter, her mother's familiar script, covering both sides of the page. Eleanor picked up the letter first. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I am sorry. Sorry that I could not tell you sooner. Sorry that I was afraid. Sorry that I let fear steal your birthright for so long. Your grandmother was not just a secretary at Sterling and Associates. She was one of the original founders. In 1962, her male partners pushed her out. They forged signatures, falsified records, and stole her stake in the company she had helped build. They told her that no one would believe a woman. They were right then, but Martha Ellis was smarter than they knew. She kept copies of everything, certified documents, witness statements, proof of the fraud they committed against her. These documents prove that 12% of Sterling and Associates belongs to our family, to you. I spent my whole life too scared to fight, too afraid of powerful men and their powerful lawyers, too worried about what they might do to us if we tried to claim what was ours. But you are stronger than I ever was, Eleanor. I see it in you, even when you cannot see it yourself. Do not let them win twice. Do not let them erase another generation of Ellis women. The truth is in this box. Your grandmother's courage is in this box. Your inheritance is in this box. Take it, use it, fight. All my love, always. Mom. Eleanor read the letter 3 times before she could breathe properly. Her hands no longer shook. They had gone completely still, the way a person's body goes still when processing information too large to comprehend all at once. Sterling and Associates. The real estate development company that had dominated the regional market for 6 decades. The company whose logo appeared on buildings throughout the city. The company where Marcus Cole had worked for 12 years. Where he had clawed his way up to vice president of operations. Where he had built his entire identity and self-worth. Her husband worked for a company her grandmother had founded. Her husband's success was built on stolen shares that belonged to her family. Eleanor set down the letter and began examining the other documents. Stock certificates from 1962, bearing her grandmother's name in elegant cursive. Original incorporation papers showing Martha Ellis as a founding partner alongside 3 men whose names Eleanor did not recognize. A ledger documenting the forced buyout, showing that Martha had been paid pennies on the dollar for shares worth fortunes, and something else, something that made Eleanor's breath catch in her throat. A separate envelope, thicker than the others, marked with her grandmother's handwriting, in case they destroy the first set. Eleanor opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were certified copies of everything, notarized witness statements, photographs of original documents, a paper trail so complete, so meticulously preserved, that even 60 years of denial could not erase it. Martha Ellis had known they would try to destroy the evidence. She had prepared for it. She had trusted no one and assumed the worst and built her case piece by piece in the shadows, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. That someone was supposed to be Eleanor's mother. Grace had not been brave enough. Now it was Eleanor's turn. She sat in that cold vault for over an hour, reading and rereading, photographing everything with her phone, building a mental map of the fraud that had shaped 3 generations of her family. When she finally emerged, her eyes were dry, and her jaw was set, and her mind was racing with possibilities she had never imagined. 12% of Sterling and Associates. In today's dollars, that stake would be worth millions. But more than that, more than money, more than revenge, more than anything else, those documents represented something Eleanor had lost so gradually she had not noticed its absence. Power. The power to make her own choices. The power to protect herself. The power to stop being the quiet, uneducated wife everyone had decided she was. Eleanor walked out of the bank and into the afternoon sunlight. She looked at the key still clutched in her hand, then tucked it back under her dress, where it had lived since her mother's final moments. "Thank you, Mom," she whispered. "Thank you, Grandma." Then she got in her car and drove home, carrying secrets that would burn her life to the ground before she could rebuild it from the ashes. Diane Murphy had lived next door to Eleanor for 4 years. She was 58 years old, retired from 30 years as a paralegal, and possessed the kind of no-nonsense wisdom that came from watching too many marriages crumble through courthouse windows. She was also the only person Eleanor trusted enough to tell. "Good Lord, honey." Diane examined the documents spread across her kitchen table, her reading glasses perched on her nose, a cigarette burning forgotten in the ashtray beside her. "If these are real, you're not just rich. You're one of the largest individual shareholders in a $400 million company." They're real. Eleanor had spent 3 days verifying everything she could verify without alerting anyone. The incorporation records match public filings. My grandmother's signature appears in historical documents from the same period. The notary stamps check out. And Marcus has no idea. No one has any idea. My mother kept this secret for 40 years. Diane set down the papers and removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose the way she did when thinking hard about something. "Eleanor, I need you to understand what you're holding here. This isn't just money. This is a bomb. The moment you try to claim these shares, every person who has profited from that fraud for the past 60 years will come after you." "I know. Do you?" "Because we're talking about corporate lawyers, board members, executives who have built their entire careers on foundations they knew were rotten. These are not people who will apologize and write you a check." "I know." "And Marcus." Diane's voice softened. "Your husband works for these people. His whole identity is wrapped up in that company. When he finds out, he's not going to find out. Not yet." Diane studied her for a long moment. "What exactly are you planning, honey?" Eleanor had been asking herself that question for 3 days. The answer had slowly crystallized, shaped by years of being dismissed and diminished, and told she did not understand how the world worked. "First, I need a lawyer. A good one, not connected to Marcus or his family or anyone at Sterling. Someone who specializes in corporate fraud and inheritance claims." "I might know someone. Ruth Blackwell. She handled a few cases when I was still working. Tough as nails, expensive as hell, but she gets results." "Can you set up a meeting?" Diane nodded slowly. "I can, but Eleanor, there's something else you need to do first. Something more important than lawyers or documents or any of this." "What?" "You need to prepare to leave him. Not someday. Not when this is resolved. Now, before he knows anything is wrong." Eleanor felt her chest tighten. "I can't just... Listen to me." Diane leaned forward, her voice dropping to the urgent whisper of someone sharing survival secrets. "I've seen this movie before, honey. Too many times. Men, like Marcus, do not lose gracefully. The moment he suspects you have any power at all, he will move to destroy you. He will empty the accounts, cancel the credit cards, change the locks. He will make you choose between fighting for your inheritance and having a roof over your head. He already controls all the money. He already makes you feel small every single day. You think a man like that is going to let you walk away with millions of dollars? With the proof that his whole career is built on stolen ground? Eleanor wanted to argue. She wanted to believe that Marcus, for all his faults, would never actively harm her. But she thought about the money disappearing from their account. She thought about Veronica's arm looped through his at the cemetery. She thought about the bruise still fading on her arm from where he had grabbed her last week when she questioned a credit card charge. What do I do? Diane's expression was grim but steady. First rule of getting out: document everything. Photographs of your belongings, copies of all financial records you can access. Write down every conversation where he threatens or demeans you. Dates, times, exact words. I've already started doing that. Good. Second rule: tell no one you don't absolutely trust. Not friends, not family, nobody. The more people who know, the more chances someone accidentally tells Marcus. Just you then, and the lawyer. Third rule, and this is the most important one. Diane reached across the table and gripped Eleanor's hand. Pack an exit bag. Tonight cash, copies of your important documents, phone charger, change of clothes. Hide it somewhere Marcus will never look. You would be amazed how many women cannot leave because they cannot find their own passport. Eleanor nodded, her mind already racing through hiding spots, calculating how much cash she could withdraw without triggering alerts, remembering where she had last seen her birth certificate. I can do this. I know you can, honey. Diane squeezed her hand once more, then released it. Your mama raised you stronger than you realize. And from what you've told me about your grandma, stubborn runs in the family. For the first time in weeks, Eleanor almost smiled. Oh, Mom. Ruth Blackwell's office occupied the top floor of a converted Victorian house on the professional side of downtown. The waiting room was decorated with photographs of court victories and framed newspaper articles about landmark cases. Everything about the space said competence, confidence, and considerable billing rates. Eleanor sat across from Ruth herself, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and the assessing gaze of someone who had seen every type of human behavior and remained unshocked by all of it. These appear authentic, Ruth said, turning pages with practiced efficiency. Your grandmother, Martha Ellis, was indeed a founding partner of Sterling and Associates. The records show she signed over her shares in 1962 for what amounts to approximately $8,000 in today's money. Shares worth millions. Worth approximately $47 million at current valuation, according to my initial estimate. Ruth set down the documents and folded her hands. Mrs. Cole, I need to be direct with you. This case is potentially significant. It is also potentially dangerous. Dangerous how? Fraud claims of this magnitude don't get settled quietly. The moment you file anything, everyone at Sterling and Associates will know. Board members, executives, shareholders who may have unknowingly benefited from illegitimate dividends for decades. These people will hire lawyers whose only job is to destroy your credibility and make these documents disappear. The documents are certified, notarized. There are witness statements, all of which can be challenged, all of which require proof of chain of custody, all of which depend on courts believing a story that powerful people will spend enormous resources to discredit. Ruth paused. And that's assuming we're only dealing with civil liability. If we can prove the fraud was ongoing, that every SEC filing for 60 years contained materially false information about share ownership, this could become a criminal matter. Eleanor felt dizzy. Criminal? Securities fraud has no statute of limitations when it involves continuous misrepresentation. Someone at Sterling has been signing documents for 6 decades claiming those shares were legitimately purchased. If we can prove they knew that claim was false. Ruth shrugged. People go to prison for less. I don't want anyone in prison. I just want what belongs to my family. I understand. But your opponents may not see it that way. To them, you won't be a victim seeking justice. You'll be a threat to everything they've built. Ruth leaned forward. There's something else you should consider. Your husband works at Sterling, high level. His career, his reputation, his entire sense of self is tied to that company. When this becomes public, he'll see me as the enemy. He may already see you as something less than an equal partner. Men who hide money from their wives, who control every financial decision, who bring their mistresses to their mother-in-law's funeral. Ruth's eyes were steady. Those men do not respond well to their wives suddenly having power. Eleanor thought about the exit bag hidden in the back of Diane's garage. She thought about the recordings on her phone, the screenshots of bank transfers, the meticulous documentation she had been building for weeks. What do you recommend? 2 options. First, we could approach the Sterling board directly. Present yourself as an interested party with historical claims. Feel them out. See if there's appetite for a quiet settlement. This is faster but riskier. They might bury evidence before we can subpoena it. And the second option? We build our case slowly and thoroughly, gather more documentation, trace the fraud through public records. When we have everything we need, we file simultaneously with the SEC and civil court. No warning, no negotiation, just overwhelming force. How long would that take? 6 months, minimum, possibly years. Eleanor closed her eyes. Years of living with Marcus, years of pretending, years of watching Veronica's triumphant smiles and Patricia's casual cruelties and telling herself it was temporary, it would all be worth it eventually. I don't think I have years. Ruth nodded slowly. Then we should discuss moving faster. But Mrs. Cole, I need you to understand something. The faster we move, the more exposed you'll be. You won't have time to build financial independence, establish separate residence, create the safety net that divorcing women need when their husbands turn hostile. What if I already have nowhere safe to go? Then we make sure you do. I have connections with domestic violence organizations, emergency housing services, legal aid groups who specialize in protective orders. Ruth's voice was gentler now. You wouldn't be the first woman sitting in that chair whose inheritance case was also an escape plan. And you wouldn't be the first whose husband tried to stop her. Eleanor thought about all the times Marcus had told her she was nothing. All the times she had believed him. All the times she had shrunk herself smaller and smaller until she fit neatly into the corner he had assigned her. She thought about her grandmother Martha, who had been erased from history but had spent years preserving proof of her own existence. She thought about her mother Grace, who had been too afraid to fight but had made sure her daughter would have the weapons to try. Let's move faster, Eleanor said. Whatever it takes. Ruth smiled, but it was the smile of someone who knew exactly how much pain lay ahead. Then let's get started. The first sign that something had gone wrong came 3 days after Eleanor's meeting with Ruth. She arrived at Sterling and Associates headquarters for what was supposed to be a preliminary conversation with the Shareholder Relations Department. Ruth had arranged the meeting carefully, presenting Eleanor as an interested party with historical documentation rather than an angry heir demanding millions. The lobby was impressive: marble floors, soaring ceilings, tasteful art suggesting success without ostentation. Eleanor signed in at the reception desk, wearing her most professional outfit, clutching a folder containing nothing but introductory correspondence. The real documents were still locked in Ruth's safe. Someone will be down shortly, the receptionist said. Eleanor waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15. The elevator doors finally opened, and Eleanor's stomach dropped. Veronica Shaw stepped out, her heels clicking against marble, her smile sharp as a knife. Eleanor, what on earth are you doing here? Eleanor forced herself to stay calm. I have a meeting with shareholder relations. A meeting? Veronica's eyebrows rose. With whom? It's personal business. How interesting. Veronica moved closer, her voice dropping to that intimate register that always made Eleanor feel small. You know, Eleanor, it's sweet that you're trying to involve yourself in important matters, but this world can be very complicated for people who didn't grow up in it. Eleanor said nothing. She was thinking about the recording app on her phone, wondering if she could activate it without Veronica noticing. Why don't I walk you up? Veronica continued. I know everyone in that department. I'm sure I can help. There was no graceful way to refuse. Eleanor followed her to the elevator, watching Veronica's reflection in the mirrored doors, seeing the calculation behind those perfectly made-up eyes. The shareholder relations office was staffed by Gerald Morrison, a man in his 60s with the tired patience of someone who spent his days explaining complex financial matters to people who did not understand them. Mrs. Cole, he said, gesturing toward a chair, I understand you have some historical documentation regarding company ownership. Veronica had positioned herself in the corner, supposedly checking her phone, but clearly listening to every word. Eleanor glanced at her, then back at Gerald. Warning bells were screaming in her head. This felt wrong. This felt like a trap. Actually, Eleanor said slowly, I've realized this should be handled through my attorney. I apologize for wasting your time. She stood to leave. Mrs. Cole? Gerald's voice was gentle, but firm. If there's a legitimate claim, we would certainly want to address it properly. May I at least see what you have? My attorney will be in touch. Eleanor walked out as quickly as dignity allowed. In the elevator, her hands were shaking. Through the closing doors, she caught a glimpse of Veronica already on her phone, speaking urgently to someone. She knew, with horrible certainty, exactly who that someone was. Gemk. The house was dark when Eleanor arrived home. She entered quietly, hoping to reach the bedroom before Marcus noticed she was back. She made it 3 steps before the living room lights clicked on. Marcus sat in his favorite chair, arms crossed, expression cold. Patricia stood behind him like a sentinel. Where are the documents, Ellie? Eleanor's heart stuttered. What documents? Don't play stupid. You went to Sterling today. You talked to Gerald Morrison. You mentioned shareholder claims. His voice rose with each sentence. Where are they? I don't know what your... Check her bag, Patricia said. Marcus was across the room before Eleanor could react, grabbing her purse and dumping its contents on the coffee table. Nothing but normal items, wallet, keys, phone, lipstick. The car, Patricia said. The bedroom, search everywhere. Those documents are my property. Eleanor's voice came out stronger than she expected. My inheritance. You have no right. Marcus laughed. It was an ugly sound. Your inheritance? You don't have anything, Ellie. You never have. Everything in this house is in my name. The cars, the accounts, everything. Not this. This belonged to my grandmother, my mother, me. Then where is it? Eleanor thought about Ruth's office safe. She thought about the cloud backup on her phone. She thought about every lesson her mother had ever taught her about never putting all your eggs in one basket. Somewhere, you'll never find it. Marcus's face twisted. He crossed the distance between them in 2 steps and grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into the same spot he had bruised before. You're going to tell me, one way or another. Let go of me, or what? You'll call the police? Tell them what? That your husband asked about some papers? He squeezed harder. Eleanor felt tears spring to her eyes, not from fear, but from the humiliation of being reduced to this. A woman trapped in her own home, threatened by the man who had promised to protect her. Marcus? Patricia's voice was sharp. Don't leave marks. It complicates things. He released her suddenly, stepping back, composing himself into something that looked almost civilized. You have 24 hours to hand over those documents, or I will make your life very, very difficult. Eleanor ran. She grabbed only her phone and her keys and the emergency cash she had hidden in a tampon box because Marcus would never look there. She drove to Diane's house with shaking hands and a bruise already blooming on her arm and the terrible certainty that her 24 hours would not be enough. The next morning, Eleanor woke on Diane's couch to the sound of sirens. She looked out the window and saw police cars in her own driveway, 2 houses down, officers moving around her front door, Marcus standing on the porch, a bandage wrapped dramatically around his forehead, Patricia supporting his arm. What the hell? Diane appeared beside her, coffee mug frozen halfway to her lips. Eleanor's phone buzzed. A text from Ruth. Where are you? Marcus filed a police report. They're looking for you. She was still staring at the message when someone knocked on Diane's door. Officer Daniels was apologetic, but firm. Eleanor Cole? You're under arrest for domestic assault and theft of marital property. That's insane. Ma'am, please don't resist. The handcuffs were cold against her wrists. Through Diane's doorway, she could see Marcus watching, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Veronica had arrived too, rushing to comfort him with exaggerated concern. I'll call Ruth, Diane shouted as they led Eleanor to the police car. Don't say anything until she gets there. Eleanor looked back once. Patricia was waving, actually waving, like she was seeing off guests after a pleasant dinner party. The police car door closed. Eleanor sat in the back seat, hands bound, future crumbling. She had underestimated him. She had thought she was being careful, thought she was playing a game she could win. She had been wrong. And now, Marcus held all the cards, and she was heading to jail, and everything she had fought for was slipping away before she had even begun to fight. The county jail smelled like despair, industrial disinfectant, unwashed bodies, the particular staleness of hope that had long since expired. Eleanor sat on a metal bench in a holding cell, still wearing the clothes she had slept in at Diane's house. Her hair tangled and her eyes red from tears she refused to let fall where anyone could see. 4 hours. She had been here 4 hours, and still no sign of Ruth. A guard finally approached. Cole, your lawyer's here. The interview room was small and cold. Ruth Blackwell sat on the other side of a scratched plastic table, her usual composure visibly strained. They moved fast, Ruth said, without preamble. Faster than I've ever seen in a case like this. Someone has serious connections. Can you get me out? Bail hearing is tomorrow. But Eleanor, there's more. Ruth opened a folder. Marcus filed an emergency motion this morning. He's claiming you're mentally unstable, that you've been making wild accusations about corporate ownership, that you attacked him when he tried to help you see reason. That's a lie. He grabbed me. I believe you, but he has a hospital report showing a head injury. He has a statement from a psychiatrist, someone his mother knows, claiming you showed signs of delusional thinking at a family dinner. I've never even met a psychiatrist. I know. It's fabricated, but the fabrications take time to disprove, and in the meantime, Ruth hesitated. He's also cleaned out every account, and he's started divorce proceedings. He's asking for the house, his house, both cars, and he's trying to have any alleged inheritance documents declared marital property. Eleanor felt the world tilt sideways. He can't do that. Those documents belong to my mother, my grandmother. They're mine. If he convinces a judge that you're unstable, that your judgment on property matters cannot be trusted, then your claims to those documents become questionable. It's a strategy, a cruel one, but effective. What do I do? Ruth's expression was grim. We fight. But I won't lie to you, Eleanor. Right now, he's winning. The bail hearing was a formality designed to break her. Judge Harold Vance looked bored, the expression of a man who had seen too many domestic disputes to find any of them interesting. Marcus sat in the gallery with Patricia, both dressed impeccably, wearing expressions of concerned citizenship. His attorney painted Eleanor as erratic, violent, delusional, a woman who had made wild claims about corporate fraud, who had attacked her husband when confronted, who posed a genuine danger to herself and others. Ruth countered with Eleanor's clean record, the suspicious timing of the charges, the likelihood that Marcus's injury was self-inflicted, but she had no proof, not yet. Not enough. Bail is set at $50,000, Judge Vance announced. Ruth turned to Eleanor. Do you have anyone who can... He took everything. There's no one. The gavel fell. Eleanor was led away. As she passed Marcus, he leaned in close enough to whisper, I told you, you have nothing. That night, lying on a thin mattress in a cell that smelled like someone else's despair, Eleanor finally allowed herself to cry. She had lost everything, her freedom, her home, her money, her claim to her mother's legacy. Even the key, her grandmother's key, had been taken during processing. She thought about her mother dying in that hospital bed, pressing the key into her palm. She thought about her grandmother Martha, erased from history, spending decades preserving proof of her own existence. She thought about all the women who had come before her, fighting and losing and fighting again. Had any of them felt this small, this helpless, this utterly defeated? Her phone was gone, but she could imagine the messages piling up. Marcus gloating, Patricia planning, Veronica measuring the drapes in what would soon be her new home. Mom, Eleanor whispered to the cracked ceiling, I don't know how to do this. I tried. I really tried, but I don't know how to win against people who make all the rules. No answer came. The ceiling remained cracked. The cell remained cold. The darkness remained complete. Eleanor closed her eyes and waited for morning, hoping something would change. She did not yet know that someone had already started working to change it. The next morning, the guard appeared at her cell with an expression of poorly concealed surprise. Cole, someone posted your bail. Eleanor walked out of the jail into blinding sunlight. She squinted, confused, expecting to see Ruth, or perhaps some representative from legal aid. Instead, she saw Diane, and beside Diane, a nervous-looking man she did not recognize. Good Lord, honey. Diane wrapped her in a fierce hug. You look terrible. Diane, how did you... I refinanced my house. No, Diane, I can't let you... Hush. You can pay me back when this is over. Besides, Vince, Diane gestured toward the nervous man. This young gentleman reached out to me, said he had information that might help. Eleanor turned to study him. He was around 40, wearing clothes that suggested IT professional, and an expression that suggested someone who had made a difficult decision and was still uncertain it was the right one. Who are you? My name is Tommy Richardson. I work in IT at Sterling and Associates. I've been there 15 years. He glanced around nervously. And I've seen things, Mrs. Cole. Things that might help you. Things that might help both of us. Diane's living room had become a war room. Tommy Richardson sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, pulling up documents that made Eleanor's head spin. Financial records, internal emails, Transfer logs that showed money moving in patterns designed to look innocent, but were anything but. 6 months ago, Tommy explained, I was asked to adjust some financial records, make certain discrepancies disappear. I said no. He paused. Since then, I've been documenting everything, creating backups, building a paper trail that nobody at Sterling knows exists. Why? Eleanor asked. Why risk your job? Your career? Because I have a daughter. Tommy's voice was quiet but steady. She's 17. She wants to study business. And I keep thinking about what kind of world I want her to inherit. One where people like Marcus Cole get away with everything, or one where someone, somewhere, finally says enough. Eleanor understood that feeling. She had felt it standing at her mother's grave. She had felt it reading her grandmother's letter in that bank vault. The moment when personal grievance transforms into something larger, something that matters beyond yourself. What exactly have you found? Tommy turned his laptop so she could see the screen. There's a group at Sterling, Marcus, Veronica, the CFO, a few others. They've been skimming from client accounts. Small amounts at first, now millions. They doctor the records, forge signatures, route the money through shell companies. Anyone who gets suspicious gets discredited or quietly pushed out. Like you? I've been sidelined for months, passed over for promotions, given performance reviews that don't match my actual work. They're building a case to fire me, same as they're building a case to destroy you. He met her eyes. But here's the thing, Mrs. Cole. Your inheritance documents? They're real. I've seen the original company records. Your grandmother, Martha Ellis, was absolutely a founding partner. The fraud against her is documented in internal files that have been buried for 60 years. Can you prove it? I can prove Marcus knew about it. I can prove the current executives knew about it. I can prove they actively concealed it and continued to file false SEC reports, knowing the share ownership was fraudulent. Tommy's expression hardened. What I can't do is make anyone listen, not without someone who has standing to bring a claim, not without someone they can't dismiss as just another disgruntled employee. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose. Some combination of both. You need me. You need me too. Your lawyer has the inheritance documents, but Marcus is trying to get them frozen. My evidence proves the fraud was ongoing, proves Marcus was involved, proves the cover-up goes all the way to the top. Together, we have everything. Apart, we have nothing. Diane had been listening silently. Now she spoke. The enemy of my enemy, and all that? Something like that? Tommy closed his laptop. Mrs. Cole, I've been watching your husband for 3 years. I've seen how he treats people he considers beneath him. I've seen how he takes credit for others' work and destroys anyone who threatens his image. Men like him don't stop. They don't feel remorse. They just keep climbing over the bodies of everyone they've crushed. I know. Do you? Because what I'm proposing isn't just about getting your inheritance back. It's about exposing everything. The fraud against your grandmother. The embezzlement happening right now. The way that company has destroyed careers and lives to protect the people at the top. He paused. Some of those people will go to prison. Marcus might go to prison. Are you prepared for that? Eleanor thought about the grave, the rain, the word uneducated thrown at her like a weapon. I'm prepared for the truth, she said. Whatever comes with it. Ruth Blackwell's office had never felt so crowded. Eleanor, Diane, and Tommy sat on one side of the conference table. Ruth sat on the other, reviewing Tommy's evidence with the focused intensity of a hawk spotting prey. This is remarkable, Ruth finally said. The embezzlement alone would be enough to bring criminal charges. Combined with Eleanor's inheritance documents and the proof of ongoing SEC fraud, She shook her head slowly. We're talking about taking down one of the most established companies in the region. How do we do it? Eleanor asked. Carefully, methodically. We need to secure all the evidence first. Make copies, establish chain of custody, then we file simultaneously civil claims and criminal referrals at the same time. No warning, no negotiation period. We hit them with everything at once before they have time to destroy anything. How long? If we move aggressively, 6 weeks, maybe less if we can accelerate some of the verification procedures. 6 weeks. 42 days of pretending everything was normal while building the case that would destroy her husband's career and possibly send him to prison. 42 days of looking over her shoulder, waiting for Marcus to make his next move. There's something else, Ruth said carefully. Something you should know before we proceed. Eleanor braced herself. What? The domestic violence charges Marcus filed against you? I've been investigating them. The hospital report for his head injury lists a timestamp that doesn't match his story. According to the emergency room records, Marcus was treated at 10:47 p.m. According to the police report, you allegedly attacked him at approximately 9:30. So his injury happened after I left. His injury happened over an hour after he claims you caused it. Either he's lying about when you attacked him, or he did it to himself. Eleanor felt sick. He hurt himself to frame me. I believe so, and I think I can prove it. Ruth pulled out another document. I have video footage from a gas station camera near your house. It shows Marcus leaving in his car at 10:15 p.m. alone, driving toward the hospital. His head is clearly unbandaged, no visible injury. So he drove himself to the hospital, hurt himself somehow, and then reported that I did it. That's my theory. It's not conclusive, but it's enough to raise serious doubt about his credibility. Combined with the financial fraud evidence, we can paint a picture of a man who lies systematically and destroys anyone who threatens his control. Eleanor thought about all the years she had believed his version of reality, all the times she had doubted her own perceptions because he seemed so certain and she seemed so confused, all the moments when she had wondered if she really was too emotional, too uneducated, too much. He's been doing this to me since the beginning, hasn't he? Making me doubt myself, making me think I was the problem. It's a pattern, Ruth said gently. It's what abusers do. They rewrite reality until their victims can't trust their own minds. Well, Eleanor's voice came out steadier than she expected. I'm done being rewritten. 6 weeks became 4 when Tommy discovered that Marcus was planning to leave the country, a business trip to Singapore, supposedly. But the itinerary Tommy found on the company's servers showed a one-way ticket and a suspiciously large wire transfer to an offshore account. He's running, Tommy said during their evening strategy session at Diane's house. He knows something is coming. He's going to disappear before anyone can stop him. When does he leave? 11 days. Ruth recalculated everything. We can be ready in 10 if we cut some corners. It's risky. Some of the verification won't be complete. But if we wait... He escapes, Eleanor finished. And everything we've worked for means nothing. There's another option. Ruth hesitated. We could try to get him to incriminate himself on record, something that would give us grounds for an emergency injunction, prevent him from leaving the country. How? You call him. Tell him you've given up. Tell him you'll sign whatever he wants, give him the documents, do anything he asks. Make him think he's won. Eleanor felt cold. You want me to talk to him? After everything? I want you to get him on tape, admitting his plans. If he mentions the offshore accounts, the flight, the fraud, Anything we can take to a judge. Ruth leaned forward. It might be the only way to stop him before it's too late. That night, Eleanor sat in Diane's kitchen with her phone in her hand and her heart in her throat. The recording app was active. Ruth was listening through an earpiece. Diane held her hand under the table. She dialed. Marcus answered on the third ring. Ellie? His voice was cautious. Where are you? I give up. Eleanor made her voice shake, which was not difficult. You win, Marcus. I'll sign whatever you want. Just please, please let me come home. A pause. She could almost hear him calculating. What about the documents? I'll tell you where they are. Everything. I just want this to be over. I just want my life back. And the charges against you? The divorce? I'll agree to whatever terms you want. I won't fight. I won't cause problems. I'll be the quiet, cooperative wife you always wanted. She let tears enter her voice. Please, Marcus. I'm so tired of fighting. Another pause, longer this time. Then Marcus laughed. It was the laugh of a man who had won and knew it. Come to the house tomorrow, alone. We'll talk. Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. I promise I'll... And Ellie? His voice hardened slightly. If you're lying, if this is some kind of trick, I will make sure you never see daylight again. I have friends in this city. Powerful friends. I can make you disappear in ways your little lawyer can't even imagine. I understand. I'll be there tomorrow. She ended the call, looked at Diane and Ruth. Did we get enough? Ruth was already replaying the recording. The threat at the end is good. The admission that he expects you to sign over documents is good. But we need more. We need him talking about the fraud directly. Then, I'll get more tomorrow. Diane shook her head. Honey, you can't actually go to that house alone. He's dangerous. I won't be alone. Eleanor's mind was racing. Veronica will be there. She's always there now. And if I can get both of them talking, get them competing to prove how much they've won. Ruth nodded slowly. Narcissists love to gloat. If you can make them feel safe enough, powerful enough, they might say things they'd never admit otherwise. Then that's what I'll do. Eleanor looked at her phone, at the recording still saved in her cloud backup. I've spent 7 years being underestimated. Let's see how that works out for them. The next evening, Eleanor walked into her former home, carrying nothing but her phone and her determination. Marcus was waiting in the living room. Veronica sat beside him on the couch, her smile triumphant, her hand resting possessively on his thigh. Patricia occupied the armchair by the window, watching with the satisfied expression of a chess player who has just called checkmate. You came, Marcus said. I wasn't sure you would. I meant what I said. Eleanor kept her voice meek, her posture small. I'm tired of fighting. I just want this to be over. The documents? At my lawyer's office. I'll sign whatever authorizations you need to retrieve them. Marcus exchanged glances with Veronica. Something passed between them, some shared amusement at Eleanor's defeat. Good, Marcus said. Very good. I knew you'd come around eventually. You always were better at following than leading. What did I tell you? Veronica laughed. Uneducated? Eleanor forced herself not to react. The recording app was running. Every word was being captured. There's just one thing I don't understand, Eleanor said, making her voice small and confused. The documents. The ones about my grandmother. Were they real? Was she really part of Sterling? Marcus's expression flickered. Does it matter? I guess not. I spent so much time believing I might be worth something, that my family might have meant something. She let tears form in her eyes. It was stupid. You were right all along. I don't understand how the world works. Veronica leaned forward, enjoying the show. Your grandmother was a secretary who got above herself. The founders humored her for a while. Let her think she was important. When she became a liability, they paid her off. She smiled. It's what happens to women who don't know their place. But the documents were probably forged, Marcus interrupted, or misrepresented. Your mother was confused. She wanted you to believe you were special. As his voice dripped with false sympathy. You're not special, Ellie. You never were. Some people are meant to build empires. Others are meant to support them. You should have accepted your role. Eleanor nodded, keeping her expression defeated. But inside, she was cataloging every word, every admission, every moment of cruelty recorded and preserved. What happens now? She asked. Now you sign the divorce papers. You take whatever settlement we offer, which won't be much, and you disappear. Marcus stood, crossing to the bar to pour himself a drink. I have a business trip coming up. Singapore. Very important meetings. When I come back, I expect all of this to be finished. Singapore, Eleanor repeated carefully. That sounds exciting. It's necessary. Marcus's voice was casual, confident. There are opportunities there that don't exist here. Certain financial arrangements that work better in international markets. He smiled. Not that you'd understand. Eleanor understood perfectly. He was talking about the offshore accounts, the escape plan, the stolen money he was planning to take with him. And when you come back? She asked. When I come back, Veronica and I will finally be able to build the life we deserve. Without distractions, without obligations, without dead weight. He raised his glass toward her. No offense, Ellie, but you were always dead weight. Veronica laughed again. Patricia nodded in approval, and Eleanor, sitting small and broken on the couch, smiled inwardly because they had just given her everything she needed. Thank you for explaining, she said quietly. I think I finally understand. Eleanor left the house with her phone full of recordings and her heart full of something she had not felt in years. Confidence, certainty, the knowledge that she had finally outmaneuvered the people who had spent so long making her feel worthless. She drove directly to Ruth's office, already composing the message she would send to Tommy. They had enough now. Marcus talking about the offshore accounts, about Singapore, about the fraud against her grandmother. Veronica admitting the documents were real, everything they needed to stop him. But when she walked into Ruth's office, something was wrong. Ruth's face was pale. Her hands were shaking slightly, the first time Eleanor had ever seen her composure crack. Eleanor, thank God, I've been trying to reach you. I got it, Ruth. I got everything. Marcus admitted to the offshore accounts, to planning to flee, to... It doesn't matter. Ruth's voice was hollow. Look at this. She turned her laptop around. The headline hit Eleanor like a physical blow. Sterling CFO arrested in embezzlement, scandal. VP Marcus Cole named as cooperating witness. What? Eleanor grabbed the laptop, scrolling frantically. This doesn't make sense. Marcus was the embezzlement. Tommy has proof? Marcus went to the FBI this morning. He gave them everything. He's claiming he was a whistleblower, that he discovered the fraud months ago and has been gathering evidence ever since. Ruth's voice was barely audible. He flipped before we could move. He turned himself into the hero of the story. Eleanor kept reading, her horror growing with every sentence. Marcus Cole. Described as a courageous executive who risked his career to expose corruption, Marcus Cole, praised by federal investigators for his cooperation. Marcus Cole, whose testimony had led to the arrest of the CFO and several other Sterling executives. And then the final paragraph, the words that destroyed everything. Cole also provided testimony regarding his estranged wife, Eleanor Cole, alleging she attempted to blackmail him with falsified historical documents and fraudulent corporate claims related to company ownership. He's framing me, Eleanor whispered. He's making me part of the conspiracy. If the FBI believes him, those inheritance documents become evidence of attempted fraud. By you. Ruth closed her eyes. I'm so sorry, Eleanor. I don't know how he moved so fast. I don't know how he knew. Eleanor's phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. She read it, and everything she had believed for the past 6 weeks came crashing down around her. The message was from Marcus. Nice try with the recordings. Too bad Ruth Blackwell has been my mother's friend since law school. Every move you've made, I've known about. See you in court. Eleanor looked up at Ruth, really looked at her, saw the guilt flickering in her eye. In her eyes, saw the slight tremor in her hands that was not fear but shame. How long? Eleanor's voice came out cold as ice. How long have you been reporting to him? Ruth did not deny it. She did not apologize. She simply sat there, hollow and empty, a woman who had betrayed another woman for reasons Eleanor would never fully understand. From the beginning, Ruth finally said, Patricia and I were roommates in college. When you walked in with those documents, I called her. I thought it would be a small matter, a family dispute. I didn't know. You didn't know he would try to destroy me? You didn't know he would use everything I told you against me? Eleanor was shaking now, with rage rather than fear. I trusted you. I told you everything. And you sold me to the people trying to erase me. I'm sorry. You're sorry. Eleanor laughed, a harsh sound that contained no humor. You handed my grandmother's legacy to the people who stole it 60 years ago, and you're sorry? She grabbed her phone and walked out. Ruth did not try to stop her. The drive back to Diane's house was a blur. Eleanor was operating on autopilot, her mind racing through the wreckage of everything she had built. Her lawyer was a traitor. Her evidence was compromised. Her husband had positioned himself as a hero while framing her as a criminal. The FBI was probably already preparing charges based on Marcus's carefully constructed lies. She had lost completely, utterly, finally. When she arrived at Diane's house, Obianaso, the older woman took one look at her face and pulled her inside without a word. What happened? Eleanor told her everything, Ruth's betrayal, Marcus's FBI testimony, the way her careful plans had been dismantled before she even knew they were vulnerable. Diane listened in silence. When Eleanor finished, she did not offer comfort or false hope. She just sat there for a long moment, thinking. You still have Tommy's evidence, Diane finally said. Ruth didn't know about him. It doesn't matter. The inheritance documents are frozen. The FBI thinks I'm a criminal. Even if Tommy comes forward now, who's going to believe us? Marcus has already written the story. We're just the liars trying to undermine it. There has to be something. There's nothing. Eleanor's voice cracked. My grandmother spent 60 years preserving evidence of the truth. My mother spent her whole life too afraid to use it. And I thought I could finally make it matter. I thought I could win. She looked down at her hands, seeing her mother's hands, her grandmother's hands. 3 generations of women, all defeated by the same forces. I'm so tired, Diane. I'm so tired of fighting people who make all the rules. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to her bookshelf, pulling out an old address book that Eleanor had never noticed before. Your grandmother, Diane said slowly, was she the type to put all her eggs in one basket? What? You said she kept copies, certified copies, notarized witness statements. A paper trail designed to survive 60 years of people trying to destroy it. Diane flipped through the address book. If Martha Ellis was that careful, do you really think she only made one set of backups? Eleanor stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying your grandmother was smarter than all of them combined. I'm saying she probably had contingency plans for her contingency plans. Diane found the page she was looking for and held it out. I'm saying that before you give up, you should talk to this woman. The page showed a name and an address. Dorothy Ellis. Shady Oaks Retirement Home, room 114. Who is Dorothy Ellis? Your grandmother's younger sister. She's 92 years old and sharper than most people, half her age. Diane met Eleanor's eyes. Your mother used to visit her sometimes, before she got sick. They would sit and talk for hours about family history, about things that happened before you were born. Eleanor felt something stir in her chest. Not hope exactly, something smaller and more fragile. Possibility. How do you know about her? Your mother mentioned her once. Said Dorothy was the keeper of family secrets. Said if anything ever happened, if Eleanor ever needed help understanding where she came from, Dorothy would know what to do. Diane pressed the address book into Eleanor's hands. Go talk to her. Before you give up on 60 years of your grandmother's work, go find out if there's anything left to fight for. Shady Oaks Retirement Home was not what Eleanor expected. Instead of the institutional depression she had imagined, the facility was warm and bright, filled with plants and comfortable furniture and the sounds of people actually living rather than merely waiting to die. Dorothy Ellis's room was in the east wing, overlooking a garden that was still green despite the autumn chill. Eleanor knocked once, then entered, when a surprisingly strong voice called out, come in, come in. I've been expecting you." The woman by the window was ancient but alert. 92 years had lined her face and bent her spine, but her eyes were the sharp blue of a much younger woman, and her expression, as she studied Eleanor, was anything but senile. "You look just like Martha," Dorothy said, without preamble. "Same stubborn chin, same way of holding yourself like you're bracing for a blow." "I'm Eleanor, Grace's daughter. I know who you are. I've known about you since the day you were born." Dorothy gestured toward a chair. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Eleanor sat, suddenly unsure how to begin. Dorothy saved her the trouble. "You found the first set, the documents in the bank vault." "How did you know about that?" "Because I helped Martha hide them." Dorothy's voice was matter of fact. 1962, I was 30 years old, working as a secretary at a law firm downtown. Martha came to me after they pushed her out. She was shaking, crying, more angry than I had ever seen her. "What did she tell you?" "That the men she trusted had stolen everything from her, that they had forged her signature, falsified the records, taken her shares for pennies on the dollar. That when she tried to fight back, they threatened to have her committed to an asylum." Dorothy's eyes hardened. That was how they dealt with inconvenient women back then. Lock them away, tell everyone they were hysterical. Eleanor thought about Marcus trying to have her declared mentally unstable. 60 years, and the tactics had barely changed. "Martha knew they would try to destroy the evidence," Dorothy continued. "So she made copies, certified copies, notarized by a lawyer who owed me a favor. We hid them in a safe deposit box under a false name, paid the rental fees decades in advance. Those documents are frozen now. The FBI... I know. Your mother called me before she died. She told me what was happening. She told me you would need help." Dorothy's expression softened briefly. Grace wanted to fight, you know. She wanted to use those documents years ago, but she was too afraid. Afraid of the lawyers, the courts, the powerful men who had already crushed her mother. By the time she found the courage, she was too sick. She passed that fear to me, that responsibility. She passed you the truth. What you do with it is your choice. Dorothy reached for a small wooden box on the table beside her. "But before you decide you've lost, you should know something." "What?" Martha never put all her eggs in one basket. Never. Dorothy opened the box and pulled out a single brass key, identical to the one Eleanor had inherited from her mother. The documents in Grace's vault were copies, backups in case the originals were ever destroyed or seized. Eleanor's heart stuttered. The originals? Martha gave them to the only person she trusted completely, Robert Hartwell, the lawyer who helped her found Sterling and Associates in the first place, the only honest man in that room. Is he still? Dead. 20 years now, but his firm still exists. Hartwell and Associates, downtown. The originals are in their archive vault, sealed by client instruction, never to be opened except by direct descendants of Martha Ellis with proper identification. Dorothy pressed the key into Eleanor's palm. This is the key to that vault. Robert Hartwell made 2 copies, one for Martha, one for me. I've been saving mine for 60 years, waiting for someone brave enough to use it. Eleanor stared at the key. Such a small thing, such an ordinary thing, but it represented everything. The originals, the proof that could not be dismissed as copies or fabrications. The evidence that would prove Marcus's FBI testimony was a lie. Why didn't my mother know about this? Because Martha never told her. She was too afraid Grace would try to fight before she was ready, that she would get herself destroyed the way Martha almost was. Dorothy's voice dropped. Martha died in 1985. I was the only one left who knew the full truth. I tried to tell Grace, but she was so scared, so beaten down by then. She made me promise to wait, to save it for someone who could actually win. What makes you think I can win? Dorothy studied her for a long moment. Because you're still here. Because you haven't given up yet. Because I can see in your eyes the same fire I saw in Martha's eyes the day she decided to fight back. She paused. And because you have something Martha never had. What? Allies. People who believe in you. People who are willing to risk their own safety to help you succeed. Dorothy smiled slightly. Your friend Diane called me 3 days ago. She told me about the IT man with the evidence. She told me about the recordings you made. She told me that despite everything, you were still looking for a way to win. That was before Ruth betrayed me. Before Marcus went to the FBI. That was before you knew about the originals. Dorothy leaned forward. Eleanor, listen to me. The documents in that vault are bulletproof. Original signatures, original stamps, chain of custody, verified by one of the most respected law firms in the state. When you present them, when you prove that Marcus's story is built on lies, everything changes. The FBI already believes Marcus. They think I'm a fraud. Then you'll have to convince them otherwise. And you'll have to do it before Marcus disappears to Singapore with all that stolen money. Dorothy's eyes were fierce. Your grandmother spent 60 years waiting for someone to finish what she started. Your mother spent her whole life too afraid to try. Are you going to let them win again? Are you going to let Marcus Cole be the one who finally erases the Ellis women from history? Eleanor looked at the key in her hand. She thought about her mother's grave, the rain, the word uneducated thrown like a weapon. She thought about Veronica's triumphant laughter and Patricia's dismissive waves and Ruth's hollow apology. She thought about her grandmother Martha, who had preserved the truth against impossible odds, trusting that someday someone would be brave enough to use it. No, Eleanor said quietly, I'm not. The Hartwell and Associates archive vault smelled like old paper and older secrets. Eleanor descended into the basement with Tommy and a new lawyer named Ellen Crawford, who had been recommended by someone Eleanor never expected to hear from. Judge Catherine Wells had contacted her the night before, reaching out through channels that were technically improper but morally necessary. Ruth Blackwell's pattern of betrayal had not gone unnoticed by the judicial system. 17 divorce cases over 5 years, all with the same outcome. Wives destroyed, husbands victorious. Ruth collecting fees from both sides. I became a judge because of women like you, Catherine had told Eleanor on the phone. My mother lost everything in her divorce 40 years ago. I swore I would never let it happen to another woman if I could help it. Now Ellen, sharp and fierce and working pro bono, led them through the dusty stacks of archived files. Ellis, the archivist muttered, checking ancient index cards. Here we are. Box from 1962. Sealed by client instruction, never to be opened except by direct descendants of Martha Ellis with proper identification. He handed Eleanor a box covered in 60 years of dust. She opened it with hands that no longer trembled. Inside lay everything. Original stock certificates with her grandmother's signature, the real incorporation papers showing Martha Ellis as a founding partner, a ledger documenting it exactly how the male partners had falsified the share transfer, witness statements from people long dead but whose words still carried legal weight, and a letter. To whoever opens this box, Martha had written in elegant script. If you are reading these words, then they tried to erase me again. They have been trying for years. They will keep trying until someone stops them. The documents in this box prove that Sterling and Associates was built on stolen shares and forged signatures. I kept silent because I had no power, but power changes hands. If you have the courage to fight, you have everything you need right here. Do not let them win twice. Martha Ellis, 1963. Eleanor held the letter for a long moment. 60 years her grandmother had waited. 60 years the truth had slept in this vault. And now, finally, it was awake. We have everything, Ellen said, her voice tight with controlled excitement. The originals, Tommy's evidence of ongoing fraud, your recordings of Marcus and Veronica, Ruth's documented betrayal. She shook her head in amazement. This isn't just enough to prove your inheritance claim. This is enough to bring down the entire company. Then let's bring it down. The Sterling and Associates boardroom had never seen a meeting like this one. Board members sat frozen around the polished conference table. Company lawyers whispered frantically to each other. Marcus Cole, who had arrived expecting to finalize his status as a heroic whistleblower, had gone pale as a corpse. Eleanor stood at the podium, her grandmother's documents displayed on the screen behind her. Beside her stood Ellen Crawford, Tommy Richardson, and an FBI agent who had been very interested in revising his understanding of the Sterling case. 62 years ago, Eleanor began, her voice steady and clear, my grandmother, Martha Ellis, helped found this company. She was brilliant, visionary, and like many women of her era, completely erased. She clicked to the first slide, Martha's original signature on the incorporation documents. The men she trusted stole her shares using forged signatures and falsified records. They told her no one would believe a woman. They were right then. Click. The ledger appeared. But my grandmother was smarter than they knew. She kept everything. Certified copies, witness statements, a paper trail so complete that even the FBI called it remarkable. She turned to look at Marcus. Your family has been lying about company ownership for 6 decades. Every SEC filing, every shareholder report, every dividend paid to people who had no right to it. Marcus tried to speak, but the FBI agent shook his head in warning. I know what you told the FBI, Eleanor continued. That I was trying to blackmail you, that my documents were forged, that I was mentally unstable. She smiled slightly. The documents I'm presenting today are originals, verified by handwriting experts, authenticated by the Hartwell firm that has preserved them since 1962. They prove, conclusively, that every word of your FBI testimony was a lie. The room erupted. Board members demanded explanations. Lawyers scrambled for phones. Marcus shouted something about his rights, about his cooperation, about how this was all a misunderstanding. The FBI agent stepped forward. Marcus Cole, you're under arrest for perjury, securities fraud, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. Eleanor watched them handcuff her husband, watched them lead him past the board members who had just learned their entire company was built on stolen ground, watched Veronica try to slip away, only to be stopped by a second agent with her own set of charges. Wait! Marcus turned, his face twisted with something that might have been rage or fear or both. Eleanor walked toward him until they were face to face for the last time. You called me uneducated, she said quietly, at my mother's grave, in front of your mistress, in front of the woman who raised you to believe you deserved everything you stole. Marcus said nothing. I am my mother's daughter, and my grandmother's granddaughter. And right now, I am one of the largest shareholders in the company you thought belonged to you. She let those words land. You were right about one thing, Marcus. I didn't understand how the world worked. I thought love meant sacrificing myself for someone who would never appreciate it. I thought being quiet meant being safe. I thought women like me were supposed to stay small. She stepped back. I understand now. Shalom. 1 year later, Eleanor knelt at her mother's grave. The headstone was clean, the grass green with spring growth, the flowers she had placed there fresh and bright. We did it, Mom, she said softly. Both of you. Diane stood nearby carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of a woman who had helped win an impossible victory. The foundation called, Diane said. 23 women helped in the first quarter alone. 23 women who got their stolen inheritances back, their erased partnerships restored, their voices heard. Eleanor stood, accepting the coffee gratefully. It's not enough. It's a start. They walked together toward the cemetery gates, the sun warm on their faces. So what's next? Diane asked. Running for office? Taking over another company? Eleanor laughed, a real laugh. Maybe the first in years. I was thinking about going back to school, actually. There's a business law program I've had my eye on. Eleanor Cole, attorney at law, has a nice ring to it. Eleanor Mason. Eleanor smiled at the surprise on Diane's face. I'm taking my mother's name back. They walked into the sunlight together. Swimbiyam. 6 months later, in a prison visitation room, Marcus Cole sat behind glass wearing orange. His hair was unkempt. His eyes were hollow. The charming confidence that had carried him through 38 years of taking whatever he wanted had finally, completely disappeared. The door opened on the visitor's side. Patricia Cole walked in, still perfectly dressed, still impeccably composed, but something cold had entered her eyes in the months since her son's arrest. Mother. Marcus leaned toward the glass. Thank God. I need you to. I'm not here to help you, Marcus. She sat down slowly, studying him the way she might study an investment that had failed to perform. I raised you to win, Patricia said, to be strong, to take what you deserved. I never taught you to be stupid. Mother, I can explain. You lost to a woman you called uneducated. You got caught by people you dismissed as unimportant. You destroyed our family's name because you couldn't control your cruelty. Patricia's voice was ice. I protected you your whole life. I gave you every advantage, and you threw it away because you couldn't resist humiliating a woman at her mother's grave. Marcus's face crumpled. I made a mistake. One mistake. You made 100 mistakes. You just never faced consequences before. Patricia stood. The family assets are being transferred, away from anything with your name on it. You'll have a public defender for your appeals. You can't do this. I'm your son. You were my son. Now you're a liability. She picked up her purse. Goodbye, Marcus. She walked out without looking back. The door closed behind her with the sound of finality. Marcus slumped in his chair, alone. The same day, Eleanor sat in her new office. Simple furniture, bright windows, a photograph of her mother and grandmother hanging on the wall behind her desk. Her phone rang. Eleanor Mason speaking. Ms. Mason? The voice on the other end was hesitant, scared, familiar, in the way that all scared women's voices are familiar to each other. My name is Sarah. I heard about your foundation. I think my husband is stealing my inheritance, and no one believes me. Everyone says I'm being paranoid. Everyone says I should just trust him. Eleanor leaned forward. Her pen was already in her hand. Her notepad was already open. Sarah, I believe you. Tell me everything. A pause, a shaky breath, the sound of a woman realizing, perhaps for the first time, that someone was actually listening. I don't even know where to start. Start at the beginning. Take your time. And don't leave out a single detail. Eleanor wrote Sarah's name at the top of the page. We're going to write it all down. We're going to document everything. And then we're going to fight. She could almost hear her mother's voice in her ear, her grandmother's voice. All the voices of all the women who had been told they were nothing, who had been erased and silenced and dismissed. But they were not gone. Their courage lived on in documents and letters and safe deposit boxes, in daughters and granddaughters, in every woman who refused to stay small. Thank you, Sarah whispered. Thank you for believing me. Thank me when we win, Eleanor said. And Sarah, we're going to win? She began to write. If you have ever felt invisible in your own life, this story is for you. If you know someone who needs to hear that they are stronger than they realize, share this video with them right now. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this one. Stories about women who refused to stay small. Stories about justice that took years but finally arrived. Stories that remind us all that the truth, once written down, can never be erased. Drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from today. And if you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have known better, type the word justice in the comments. Let us see how many survivors are in this community. Now, let us begin. 3 weeks before that funeral, Eleanor's life looked completely different on the surface. Thank you for staying with Eleanor until the end of her journey. Thank you for believing in her story, and thank you for being part of a community that celebrates women who fight back. Before you go, remember this. The people who try to make you feel worthless are often the ones most afraid of your power. Do not let their fear become your limitation. If this story moved you, hit that like button. If it made you think of someone who needs to hear it, share it with them now. And if you want more stories about ordinary people achieving extraordinary justice, subscribe and join this family. Final credit. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful lessons and real value to our viewers. Every story we tell is crafted with purpose, designed not just to entertain, but to inspire, educate, and empower. Thank you for trusting us with your time. We do not take that gift lightly.